And throughout all of your experience, do you have like a particular point or a particular thing that made you grow the most?
I think in college I had 3 internships. In each one I had a mentor that taught me something really important. I think my first internship was actually a design internship. I was intending to go into UX design. And my mentor told me to learn iOS and Swift specifically. And he said that that skill would be endlessly powerful in the future. So that was the first really consequential bit of advice that I got. Second, I took an internship in Bulgaria, and basically the lessons from my mentors there were about listening to users and listening to how you can really make an impact for people. And then from that, developing technical requirements for different projects. I think that was something I really learned there. And then at Yahoo is really about honing my iOS skills and really just head down coding, learning how iOS works, because again, in school no one really learns iOS.
Yeah, I see. So prior to learning iOS and Swift, you had quite a computer science background, correct? So how easy was it to kind of learn Swift, knowing the fundamentals?
I think Swift is one of the best languages that I've worked in. I think that Xcode is really awesome and really easy to understand. It's a really great object-oriented language that is not as complicated to run as C++ or Java. And I think, especially early on, I got a lot of reward from seeing my work play out on an actual device, and I could build something that I could see. And so I think that made my learning more enjoyable and faster.
So when tackling these things with iOS, did you have like particular projects in mind you really wanted to do, or did you just like wanted to execute or do whatever was thrown at you?
I've always had ideas that I wanted to build, but it was more about a feeling that I wanted to create for people, an experience that I wanted to create for people. And so for that reason, I never really had any interest in working further away from the user. I always wanted to work on the front end, web or iOS or even UX design, kind of in that user space.
I see. So when tackling, let's say, a new technology, what are your main resources?
What do you
For
mean?
example, when you tackled Swift, what were your main resources? Did you grab a textbook? Did you watch some videos? Did you look at the docs?
Well, I'm pretty cheap, so YouTube was my main source of education. Something interesting about iOS is that it's really hard to learn or code in Swift without a Mac, an Apple computer of some sort, which I didn't own at the time. And I still, I wanted to learn, but I wasn't sure if I should invest a couple $1,000s into a nice Mac computer. So what I ended up doing was I went to my university computer lab, and kind of in the back corner there were 2 really old Macs, and so that's where I learned how to code Swift, and I just used YouTube in that computer. After that, so I mean, now that I know how awesome these paid courses are, though, I have turned to those. So for example, I'm learning about augmented reality right now on the iPhone, and to learn that I've paid for a $20 course, and a really comprehensive course that I can go through, and it'll take maybe 10-20 hours, and by the end I should be a pretty good expert in that. So I think there are courses that are worth paying for.
I see. Do you have any recommendations for this, such as Udemy?
Yeah, the AR courses on Udemy. I like Sean Allen a lot.
So let's say we have, some users that are pretty new to engineering, computer science, all of that. Will you recommend them to just tackle something like iOS from the get-go, or more like learn the fundamentals and then kind of tackle it and go in?
Yeah, I think there's like a base level understanding that people should have before trying to get into anything, but I think the best way to learn it is to try and build something. I think Swift is a really great language to learn those things because it's very forgiving, the error handling, and the way the language guides you, and I find it very readable and very understandable. So maybe learn the fundamentals in Swift. I learned the fundamentals in C++, which I think was really great at building a base, but was really frustrating as a beginner. So I think Swift would be more rewarding for my little cousins who who are interested in coding.
And in terms of C++ at the beginning for the beginner, you were saying that the main struggles were things like syntax and like getting the things to run. So you wouldn't kind of see your work, if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah. There's like a disconnect. There's like IDEs that you have to download, and then compilers, and then you gotta learn how to use the terminal, and then you gotta do this and that, and then there's all sorts of things that could go wrong in that, and then finally you run a code, and there's a disconnect between the errors on one screen and on one window, and then the code on the other window, and I think that's really difficult. Whereas in Xcode, it'll show you right where it is.
So this kind of thing creates like extra burden for the developers. Well, if you're like in a good like environment, maybe Xcode or maybe the company already has like tools set up for you, you can just get to coding and get to output and just learning or creating your product.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I see. That's pretty great.